Okay, so yesterday we talked about different forms of government, and we talked about geographic distribution of power. So whether that power lies at the national level or the local level, or as we see with federalism, the sharing or division of power between national, state, and local governments. Correct? Okay, so today we're going to continue with different forms of government, but on a different criteria. And this will be different forms of government based on the number of people who can participate in government. So that's your header, number of people that can participate in government. You might be able to figure out where I'm going with this. Okay. So first type of governments we're going to look at under those who can participate is dictatorships. Dictatorships. And there are a lot of different kinds of dictatorships. I'm going to have like 6 or 7 of them. Okay. And within those dictatorships, there's going to be some slight differences between them. So let me give you a definition of a dictatorship. And that is those who rule do not follow the will of the people. Those who rule do not follow the will of the people. All right. So going back to yesterday and thinking about the history of different types of dictatorships, can anybody give me a name of a type of dictatorship?
Tyranny.
Tyranny is an effective dictatorship. Think of like today in the world. Yeah. Monarchy. Yes, that's exactly what I was looking for. Monarchy. Okay, and how do you become a monarch? The birthright, blood, hereditary, right? Okay, so we're looking at kings, queens. There's something like 40 monarchies in the world today. Some of the more notorious, obviously, Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. A lot of the Middle Eastern countries like Kuwait, Bahrain, and others have different forms of monarchies. Now, we would call, obviously, Great Britain or United Kingdom a constitutional monarchy. Okay, and with a constitutional monarchy, what you have is where the power lies with the Constitution, not with the monarch. Does that make sense? But those aren't dictatorships, so we're not talking about them yet. Okay, so it's a family dictatorship. Okay, most monarchies are autocratic or an autocracy. Not an autocracy, an autocracy. Okay. Auto meaning
Self.
or one, yes? Okay. So that's ruled by one. Okay. Now, other dictatorships that aren't monarchies can also be autocracies. And this is where you get into a little bit of confusion when we talk about oligarchies. Oligarchies are dictatorships. Does anybody know? Rule by a few. Rule by a few or a small group would be an oligarchy. And probably the best example I could give you of an oligarchy today is China. China has 1.3 billion people. Okay? less than 1% of those people are members of the Communist Party. Okay, most Chinese are not members of the party. The party itself gets to elect the leader. So that small group, okay, or the Politburo in the Soviet Union, which was kind of their Communist Party members, they got to choose the dictator. Okay, but really it's an oligarchy, ruled by a few. Does that make sense? Okay. So China's a really good example of that today. Now let's think about some other types here. Think of any dictators in the world today. Name a dictator today.
Is Putin considered one?
No.
Kim Jong-un?
Kim Jong-un, right? Kim Jong-un from North Korea. Now, what type of dictator is he? When you see Kim Jong-un generally dressed, is he wearing a suit and tie, or what is he generally wearing? A weird kind of greenish jumpsuit type of thing. Think back to Saddam Hussein. Okay, what would that guy, or Fidel Castro, what was that guy generally wearing in public? Huh? Military uniform. Okay, some type of military garb. And so we would refer to these as military dictatorships. And they're pretty easy to pick out. Okay? Okay, so if we compare, say, Iraq under Saddam Hussein as a military dictator, you go over to the neighbor, Iran. They have a dictatorship too, but it's a different kind of dictatorship. They're ruled by somebody else. Who rules Iran? Anyone? Religion. Okay, or the imams, or for the Iranians, it's called the Ayatollah. Okay, he's the ruler of Iran, which is a religious leader. Okay, so what do we call that? Good, a theocracy. Now, we don't recognize al-Baghdadi and his caliphate, okay, in Syria and Iraq, ISIS. Okay, we don't recognize that as a legitimate government, but ISIS would be a theocracy as well. Okay, there's really I I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that Iran is the only one that I'm aware of in the world today. Okay, now there are some countries that try to implement Sharia law, which is Islamic law, okay, that people live under. So in some countries like Saudi Arabia, they have strict Islamic law, but they're ruled by a king. Okay, so it's not really a theocracy. There's no really like hardcore Christian nation that you could call a theocracy, or a Buddhist nation. You follow me? Okay, so I think Iran's really the only one that classifies it as that. Okay. All right, so we've kind of covered quite a few of these. Now, theocracy is probably going to be autocratic, but it could be an oligarch. Okay, so there's crossover here, right? So your monarchy generally is autocratic. Your military dictatorship is generally autocratic. Theocracy in Iran could be autocratic, or if there's a group of imams that rule, it could be an oligarch. Okay? Now, we start to get some other terms in here that we want to bring into this idea of dictatorship. Okay? And there would be more characteristics of dictatorships. Okay? So, within the same realm, we're going to talk about authoritarianism. all dictatorships are authoritarian. Okay? And basically what authoritarian means is that power is absolute and unchangeable. Power is absolute and unchangeable when you start talking about authoritarian. Now, what about this? Totalitarian. So totalitarian, some dictatorships tend to be a little bit milder than others. Some tend to be very very firm, totalitarian. So to describe a country like North Korea, that is a totalitarian state. They control every aspect of life, usually through force, an iron fist, if you will. I don't think you would probably classify, you could, I think if you wanted to, classify China as totalitarian, but they do have quite a bit of economic freedom in China. Same thing in Vietnam. You have a situation where, the government's a dictatorship, it's an oligarch, but you do have some freedoms. Now, speech, especially political speech, is not free. You don't have human rights, like practicing religion and so forth freely without fear of repercussions. So it's not a free society, but is it totalitarian? Okay, and control of information, the internet. So it wouldn't be a stretch to call China or Vietnam totalitarian, but in the same sentence, they do have some economic freedom, some freedom of movement, and so forth. So I don't know if you truly cast them as such. Okay, and then we always get this. The difficulty of describing fascism, okay, as a dictatorship, okay. Rachel, you're the only one. We did this in history last semester, so these guys maybe have a little bit. We'll do it later. But we talked about what's called temporary fascism. Remember when we talked about fascism? There's 4 characteristics. You have a strong leader, right? You have a crisis. And because of that crisis, you need action. And that's going to give more power to the leader or to the executive, the person in charge, whether it be the President of the United States or a dictator, okay, an Adolf Hitler, okay. And then the last one, there's usually some type of symbol involved with fascism, whether it be the flag or, a swastika. For Mussolini, it was, the black shirts, these sorts of things. So fascism, difficult to define as a dictatorship. You do have fascist dictators, okay, but they are very few. Really, Mussolini and Hitler are the 2 that we can really point to in history. Because communist dictators are different than fascist dictators. They share a heck of a lot in common. But so I wouldn't really classify fascism as a dictatorship, okay? Because I think it can be, it can exist not in a dictatorship. All right, so that kind of covers dictatorships. And so next, when we're talking about the number of people that can participate as different forms of government, the next logical step is where a lot of people get to participate in government. And we're going to call that democracy, okay? as simple as this will be when I explain it to you guys, there is a large segment of our population that really doesn't understand this. The two different types of democracy, okay? The first, of course, is your pure democracy, which is referred to as direct. Now, to define democracy, you would define it as such: supreme political authority, or sovereignty, rests with the people. Rule by the people. Okay? So your direct democracy is a situation where you have true or pure democracy, where everybody has a say on every issue. Everybody has a vote on every issue. Now we, over the last 15, 20 years, have developed some amazing technology in this world. And in order for you to have a direct democracy, it has to be in a very small territory. Okay? You can't have a direct democracy in a situation in a country this large, except now we have this amazing technology. These things. Okay, where we can communicate very easily. So what if the government made sure that every American had access to a device that could connect to the internet? And every morning when we wake up, okay, there would be a series of questions that you would vote on. Spend $5.7 billion to fund a border wall on our southern border. Yes or no? Legalize marijuana. Yes or no? We just take it's just like taking a poll. Okay, if you don't want to vote, you don't have to. Okay? But if every person got one of these devices, could we have a direct democracy? Okay. Pull out all of our troops out of Afghanistan. Yes or no? Spend $720 billion on the military next year. Yes or no? And if you say no, then we put it back up there and say, okay, well, how about $650 million for the military? Well, what do you know about the needs of our military? Is this a good idea? Okay. We don't live in a democracy, right? This is not what we have. All right? And why do we not have this? Yeah.
Because the people aren't always smart.
Because the people aren't always smart. There's a little harsher way of saying that. People don't pay attention. People aren't educated. People have lives. That they go to work and they raise kids and they're busy. This is not their job to pay attention to every single issue facing this country, is it? They don't have the time. Now, they do have the ability to learn about all those issues. Okay, but people don't take the time. Guys, the founders of this country feared democracy. And in fact, it's quite scary to think about having a true democracy. This is what Rousseau espoused. This is what we're going to learn when we read these political philosophies. This is what inspires the French Revolution. This is what creates the mob. Everybody thinking they have the ultimate say on every issue. This creates a scary situation. Okay? You guys are reading The Tale of Two Cities. You understand what happens when people think they have this type of authority. They will take out their frustration on other people. And the majority can destroy the minority. And when I say destroy, I mean destroy. Okay? The founders of this country referred to democracy as mobocracy. And they feared it. Okay? Now what you're going to see, guys, when you watch television, you listen to politicians and talking heads on the news, you're going to hear people say it. We live in a democracy. Okay? There is a political statement behind that. They're trying to get an uneducated people that don't know the difference between a direct democracy and a representative democracy. People that didn't pay attention in government class in their senior year of high school. And they're trying to dupe them into thinking that we actually do live in a democracy. Okay, which is irresponsible. And it helps create a mob mentality. Okay, sorry. The second type of democracy is representative democracy. I mean, if you guys want to define this, everybody votes on every issue. Okay. In a representative democracy, let me define it for you. A small group of people are chosen by people to represent their will. A small group of people are chosen by people to represent their will. There's another name for this. We don't live in a democracy, we live in a republic. The founders of this country, guys, didn't just make this crap up. Okay? They studied different forms of government throughout history. Okay? The system that we have is very well thought out. Okay? And when you talk about things that you hear out in the world, like the Electoral College, okay? Why do we have that? We need to do away with that. We live in a democracy. The popular vote should count. Okay? Well, there are some reasons why we have the Electoral College. Okay? Listen. Most of the people in this country, population-wise, live, I saw this thing, within 316 square miles of each other. When you break apart this country is based on population, you have huge population centers in the Northeast. You have huge population centers on the West Coast. And then down in the Gulf of Mexico by Texas, you've got Houston and Dallas, okay? Huge population centers, okay? Do you want the people in those 1, 2, 3, or 4 areas to dictate for the whole rest of the country how we live? Because that's where most of the people live. Within 50 miles, okay, of the Atlantic Ocean, the Great Lakes, the Gulf, and the left coast. Okay? Do you want those groups of people where there's heavy population centers to dictate how we live for the rest? Because if you go to a popular vote and you go to a true democracy, politicians will not listen to us in the heartland. They will not. They will ignore us and the things that are important to us. Because there's no voters out here. There's more voters in New York City than there is in Kansas and Nebraska and South Dakota combined. And if you want to add New Jersey into that, you can add in North Dakota, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and New Mexico. Cut a swath right down through the middle of the country. There's more voters in that very small area. Okay? There's a reason they did this. Okay, so it's important just not to just say, well, okay, well, you got democracy, and then you got representative democracy. Who gives a crap? Well, I do. All right? So, relationship. All right, so we're going to break down. We're done with this pure democracy crap, okay? The mob. All right? And we're going to talk about republics and representative democracy. Okay? And we're going to break this down into two systems. Okay? The first is going to be, and let me just preface this. With these republics, this is going to be based on the relationship between the executive and the legislature. Okay? All right. This is where I just have this pop into my head. Okay? And it's something that some years I forget to do. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop talking about that just for a minute. Okay? Because I have this fear that there may be somebody sitting out there among you that has no idea what I'm talking about when I talk about the executive, the legislature, and the judicial. Okay, so we're going to do some basic U.S. government stuff here just to make sure you got the basics. Okay? And I'll probably teach something maybe you forgot or didn't remember. Some of this is you're going to be like, really, Mr. Ebright? We learned this in 7th grade. Let's go for it. Okay? The legislative branch. Okay? What do we refer to our legislative? And you could put this like on the inside of your notebook just to refer back to in case you're confused or something. Okay? All right. So, legislative branch in this country, what do we refer to it as? Congress. Good. All right. Same thing. They're synonymous. The legislative branch and Congress synonymous. Okay? We call our Congress, it has 2 chambers, and what's the proper name for that? Our legislature is? Bicameral. Cameral, thank you. Bicameral means 2 chambers. Okay? One chamber called the House of Representatives. How many members are there in the United States House of Representatives?
200 something.
Huh?
Like 200 something.
That's a poor guess, but thank you for trying. Say that again? Another poor guess, but thanks for trying. I'm just getting you guys on camera. All right, we're going to play a game. Matthew,
Yes, sir.
define federalism.
The sharing or division of power between federal, local, and state.
Nice. Did you guys catch that?
Probably
That was
a
good.
quarter, but
That was clutch, Matt. Okay, now, 435. 435 members of the House of Representatives. How many members are there in the United States House of Representatives?
435.
Okay, that needs to be a chorus. Like, I finished the word representatives, and I hear from the class. How many members of the United States House of Representatives?
135.
Okay, that was pretty weak, but okay. All right. All right, so I'm going to bust that out on you guys, and you're going to be ready. The people watching on the video, you need to be ready for that. Okay. The Senate. How many members of the Senate?
100.
100. How many flags or stars on the flag? 50 times 2. 50 states, each gets 2. The Senate has 100. This is our legislative branch. And the legislative branch, number one thing they do, although they have multiple responsibilities, which we will talk about, but we're going to focus on this letter right here. L. L, legislature. L, laws. Okay? Laws. All right. One down. Executive branch. All right. In this, the head of the executive branch is the President of the United States. You got the Pres, you got the VP. Okay? And then under the President, he has a group of people that advise him. We call them the... Starts with a C. The Cabinet, thank you. There are 15 cabinet departments. Otherwise known, they don't always call them the cabinet. Sometimes they call them executive departments. Okay? 15 of them. Same thing. These are the same thing. Okay? Now, Department of State, Department of Treasury, Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, which was the last one created after 9/11. Department of Health and Human Services, Transportation, Education, Commerce, Veterans Affairs, Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development, not now. Later. Okay. Interior. Come on. Interior. All right. So there's 15 of these. But guys, then there are thousands of government agencies. Like the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the FTC, the FAA, the Pentagon, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, the Coast Guard, and soon, the Space Force. I'm not kidding. NASA, Army Corps of Engineers, the EPA, the IRS. It goes on and on and on and on. Okay, I mean seriously. Stuff you know, Office of Science and Technology. They just keep popping into my brain, all right? Thousands of agencies, federal government agencies. The largest employer in the United States of America is the executive branch of government for the national government. Walmart is not the largest employer in this country. It's our government, okay? Close to 3 million people, okay? Now, about 800,000 of those right now have been told not to show up for work, okay, during the shutdown. All right, here we go. By the way, President Trump reclassified some positions as necessary so that some more people would start reporting for work. We are starting to feel this thing a little bit, okay? All right, so executive branch. Now, what do they do? And this is pretty easy. So you take executive and you go execute. Okay? They execute the laws or carry out the laws. That's what the executive branch does. Okay? Congress passes the law, the president enforces the law. I forgot Department of Justice. Sorry, that was the 15th one, I believe. That's the Attorney General. 15 cabinet departments. right? How can you forget that? So, now he has other roles, and the president wears a lot of different hats. Okay, he has a lot of different jobs. Okay. All right, commander-in-chief, chief executive, chief administrator. We'll talk about all this. All right, now, later. Judicial branch. Okay. Now, the Constitution only mentions one court in the Constitution. And that, of course, is the Supreme Court. There's only one U.S. Supreme Court. There are 9 members. Okay? All other courts below it were created by Congress. So all the federal appeals courts, we have 13 circuit courts. These are appeals courts, 13 geographically distributed around the country. And then we have federal district courts, and there's 94 of these. We have one in Wichita. Okay. Now, their job is to judge the law, interpret the law, and what document? The Constitution. Okay? So Congress passes a law, or the president takes an action. This third branch can judge that or interpret that action or law as constitutional or unconstitutional. That is called the power of, starts with a J, judicial. It's been a while for you guys. Judicial review. Okay? Now, originally, as we're going to find out, the Supreme Court did not have this power until they created that power for themselves in 1803. In a Supreme Court case called M&M. Marbury versus Madison. Okay? And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Was that smart to do? Yes. that little voice in my head said, wait a second. I know they have a clue, but is it enough? Okay, so that's good to just kind of go back over. All right, and I do want to finish this. We've got 10 minutes. I apologize, but I do want to finish this because I want to move right when our people get back. Tomorrow I'm just going to show you a video, okay? And we'll have a nice relaxing Friday morning together, okay? And then when everybody gets back on Tuesday, I do want to jump right back into the philosophy, the political philosophies. So I want to hammer this down and talk about 2 systems within a republic, okay? And it deals with this relationship between the executive and the legislature. Okay? So we got first we'll go let's do parliamentary systems first. Okay? And first thing everybody thinks about when they hear about is Britain, right? You think Parliament, you think Great Britain, the United Kingdom, and so with a parliamentary system, okay, it's much different than ours. Okay, so they have a prime minister in England, right? We have a president. In Japan, they have a prime minister. In Britain and Japan, they also have this other leader. They call that person the head of state. And in England, it's who? Queen Elizabeth. And in Japan, it's the emperor. Okay? So, the head of state is different than, here we go, Chief executive. The chief executive is the prime minister. They run the executive branch. So based on what we just learned about our executive branch, what does the chief executive do in Great Britain? The prime minister, they execute the law. They carry out the law. They run the day-to-day affairs of the country. The Queen doesn't do that. The Queen is a figurehead, a representative of the country, the leader of the country. In our system, a presidential system, the president is both head of state and chief executive. If aliens came here from another planet and landed in Wichita and they said, hey, take me to your leader, we would take them to the president. Okay? That was Marvin Martian.
That's on
Talk to
YouTube.
you.
That's forever on YouTube.
Now, here's another difference with the parliamentary system. In order to be the prime minister, you must be an MP to be the PM. Not military police. What's an MP in Britain? You are a member of Parliament. You have to be a member of Parliament in order to become the Prime Minister, because who elects the Prime Minister? Parliament. Not the people. The people elect Parliament. Parliament elects the Prime Minister. But you got to be a member of Parliament in order to be elected Prime Minister. Yesterday, Theresa May survived a vote of no confidence. Okay? She got a vote of confidence, even though this whole Brexit thing is dragging out. Okay? She had a plan to get Britain out of, and they didn't like it, and they voted that down day before yesterday, and then they had a vote of no confidence yesterday. She survived that, but not her plan to get out of the European Union. Okay? All right. So, what's the relationship here between the executive and the legislature? Okay, in a parliamentary system, they are connected. The two branches are connected, right? Which is great, and I love it, because the prime minister is subject to the legislature, to the parliament. They have to answer directly to them. Our president goes in front of the Congress one time a year, and nobody's allowed to say anything back to him. So the president gets up there and talks, and everybody either claps or they sit on their hands. Well, let me introduce you to the British Parliament, where the Prime Minister is a member, where they have to show up and answer to the other members, to their face, and off the cuff. I mean, it's a riot. I mentioned there's a bar right off I should say, a pub right off the, you can walk out of the House of Commons into a pub. That's generally where they're hanging out before they go into the House. So it's a riot. I mean, just YouTube some funny clips from the British Parliament. Okay, they're yelling at each other. They're laughing. They're cracking jokes about each other. Yeah.
How is their checks and balances then? The executive has to-
It's less. They have fewer checks and balances. Okay? And so our system, the presidential system, okay, to wrap this up quickly, okay, presidential. Okay, first of all, head of state, and president are the same. Same person. Okay? Second, the relationship between executive and legislature are separate. Okay? When Barack Obama was running for president, he was a sitting member of the United States Senate. When he won the presidency, he had to give up his seat in the Senate In order to become president, you can't be in both. Does that make sense? And our Congress does not elect our president. The people do through the Electoral College. So there is a strict separation, as you brought up. Where's the separation, the checks and balances? Separation of powers. So that these two branches don't collude with one another. That they can stop each other from doing what they want, which is exactly what we're seeing in Washington right now, is a system of mutual frustration. Where democracy is the worst form of government on the planet. Except for all the rest. Right? As Churchill said. Okay? It's messy, guys. It's gridlock. It stinks. And what really stinks is that this is all about politics. This has nothing to do with policy. If you look at many of those Democrats that, like Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, these leaders, they have supported walls being built on the southern border in the past. Now, do people change their opinion? Yes. Okay? But this smells really political. Because this is what Trump built his presidency on, was immigration. And they don't want to give him a victory. And he doesn't want to give in because he thinks he's going to lose his base. And so both sides are being so freaking stubborn right now. And it's all politics. It's $5.7 billion, guys. That's less than 1/2 of 1% of the entire budget. It's ridiculous. But that's America. And that's our political system. And you guys have a great day.